Does the plaintiff have another witness, Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes, Your Honor.
You solemnly swear you testify to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, watch that cord, please. And the stair. Please have a seat here. And kindly speak in the microphone. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Sir, could you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Lieutenant Brandon Kutz, K-U-T-Z.
Sir, are you employed?
Yes, I am.
And with whom?
City of Cleveland Division of Police.
Okay. In what capacity?
I'm the Lieutenant Officer in charge of the Cleveland Police Training Section.
And sir, could you please, how long have you been a police officer?
17 years.
And could you tell us your history as a police officer?
Sure, I was hired in 1998. I served 10 years as a patrol officer in the Old 5th District, 8 years in basic patrol, 2 years in the Community Services Unit. I was promoted to sergeant in 2008. I was transferred to the new 5th District, did 4 years as a sergeant, 2 years in basic patrol, 2 years in the Community Services Unit. I was promoted to lieutenant in 2012. I did a couple months in the 5th District on a platoon, basic patrol, and then transferred to the training section.
And so your current position is where now?
Training.
What do you do?
I oversee the training section. The training section is made up of 3 units. It's the academy, the gymnasium, and the ordnance unit, or the outdoor range.
Okay, and tell the court what's the academy? Explain what that is.
The police academy oversees the training of the division, both new recruits and active police officers.
Okay, and what do you train them in?
Basic training is everything. It's a 6-month. We have a 6-month training academy. It's overseen by the Ohio Police Officer Training Commission, and it covers pretty much every aspect of being a police officer in that 6 months. For the active duty police officers, we do in-service training as well as other standalone training.
Okay, do you do what you call retraining?
Yes, we do that as well.
What is retraining?
Retraining is we usually get an order from the chief stating that a police officer needs to be retrained, and whatever the chief tells us he wants him retrained in, and we conduct the training.
And who determines the policies and procedures that you train in the academy?
Chief of police.
Okay. And how about, does the law have anything to do with what you're training?
Absolutely.
Okay. And who determines the curriculum?
It depends. I answer to 2 masters, one being the Ohio Police Officer Training Commission. They oversee the training of recruits. They provide the curriculum. They supervise, make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then they also provide guidance for continuing professional training for active duty police officers. I also answer to the Chief of Police, and we train to what he wants us to train to.
Okay. And do the officers have to be, I should say, to make an analogy, like a continuing education every year?
Yes.
Could you explain that?
Officers are required to go through in-service training every year. The state has certain mandates. We exceed those mandates. The mandates, for instance, the last 2 years have been 4 hours of continuing professional training. We provide anywhere from 24 to 40 hours of continuing professional training.
And every police officer has to do that every year?
Correct.
No matter what position?
Correct.
Okay. And do you train in the use of force?
Yes, we do.
And, sir, are you familiar with the use of force policy as it existed on November 29, 2012?
I am.
Okay. Sir, I'm going to show you some marks for identification. May I approach you on?
Sure.
I'll show you some marks for identification purposes, States Exhibit 1185. Do you recognize that document, sir?
Yes, I do.
And what is it?
It's the use of force policy that was active as of May 7, 2007. It was the use of force policy that was active in 2012.
And, sir, and if you could go over that policy with us, okay?
Okay.
tell us what the use of force policy in the city of Cleveland, November 2012, and what did that entail?
The use of force policy, it entails everything that might include deadly force down to, at that time, what we called use of non-deadly force.
So there's two kind of forces, deadly and non-deadly.
Correct.
Okay, and how do you determine what appropriate actions are in each context? And what I'm getting at is, maybe I should rephrase my question, is there a continuum for each one of those use of forces?
At that time, the use of force policy did include a force continuum.
Okay, could you explain to the court the use of force continuum for non-deadly force?
Let me interrupt. Did you say did or didn't include?
At that time, it did include a continuum.
Okay, thank you. So go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Can you ask the question again, please?
Yes. What was the continuum for non-deadly force?
The continuum, basically what it does is it lays out the suspect's actions and then recommended actions by the police officer in response.
Okay, so give us for an example.
For example, under the category of, at that time it was called blue, not responding, the suspect doesn't respond to commands, or there are verbal or physical danger cues, it recommends a response of balance displacement, escort position, balance. The response by the officer, the recommendations are balance displacement, escort position, other members assisting, member presence, verbal or physical commands.
Okay. And is there any type of, I should say, tools or equipment that is used in non-deadly force that is recommended?
It's anywhere from physical force, body force, all the way through batons, the taser, OC spray.
Okay. Now let's talk about deadly force for a second. Could you tell the court what the criteria was at that point in time for the use of deadly force if you're a City of Cleveland police officer?
Deadly force is any response to any life-threatening assault that could cause death or serious physical injury to either the officer or somebody else. And
did you teach what, I should say, for lack of a better word, the legal standard was?
At the end of the day, the legal standard is always based on the Constitution. It's always what is considered to be objectively reasonable force based on the circumstances.
And this policy was taught to every police officer in the academy?
Yes.
And how about in the in-service training that you have every year?
Yes, every year.
Is there any type of document or anything that the patrol or the officers sign to make sure that they've done this course, and how do you document that?
They sit in a class. We give classroom instruction on the policy, and then we test them.
Okay. Sir, and what is the continuum for deadly force? And we're talking about when it was in effect in November 2012.
What the continuum reads in the use of force policy, it's considered the red category. Suspect actions would include weapon used against a member, attempting to disarm a member, life-threatening weaponless assault, or suicide attempt.
Okay. And what is the response?
According to the policy, a deadly force, sleeper holds, beanbag shotgun.
So that's the highest level.
That's the highest level.
Okay. What's then the next level?
It's called orange. The suspect actions would be striking or kicking a member. The recommended response of baton or aspect techniques.
So if we're in the orange situation and I'm kicking you and striking you, I can't pull out my gun and shoot you?
The recommended is baton or asp techniques according to the policy, but and the reason we moved away from a force continuum is that it's often a fluid situation, and these are recommendations. It even says in the policy that this is a guide to the recommended response to a use of force.
And that's what I was going to talk to you about, Lieutenant, and that is these guidelines you do have, I should say, qualifications in them, in the sense that you can act, I don't want to say outside, but as a result of some of these activities. You know what I'm talking about? Am I asking that question right?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So I'm saying these are general standards, correct?
Correct.
And you can deviate from these general standards?
They are fluid situations. So you cannot deviate from the policy. However, the policy is not, the force continuum was never meant to be rigid. And in fact, that's why we moved away from it. It implies rigidity in responses. In fact, some of the confusion has been, well, do we need to go from the lower end of the use of force spectrum and try everything out until we get to the top, and that's just not realistic.
Because really, you could have a situation where you would have trying to effectuate arrest where it could escalate to the fact that you'd have to then use deadly force, correct?
Correct.
But getting back to the continuum that you don't have anymore, you had red being the top, correct?
Correct.
And then there was orange you talked about. And what is the next one down?
Next one down is yellow. It describes the suspect's actions as wrestling or pushing a member or active physical resistance. And the recommended response is striking, punching, kicking, tear gas, OC pepper spray, electrical devices such as a taser, restraints or restraint techniques.
Okay, and the next one is green, down, correct?
Correct.
And then finally blue.
Correct.
But this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stage continuums are no longer in effect in the city of Cleveland, correct?
We moved away from it, yes.
When was that?
I believe it was 2013 was when the new, I'd have to look at the new policy date, but I think it was 13 or 14.
To your knowledge, this incident we're talking about today, did it have any effect on the change of that use of force policy, to your knowledge?
What, subsequent remedial measure? Right. Yeah, I'm not certain that this is relevant.
That's fine, Judge. I'll move it.
The rules of evidence, so.
That's fine. I'll move it. Sir, do you also teach tactics?
The training section does, yes.
And what kind of tactics do you teach?
We teach a wide variety of tactics.
Well, give us.
Traffic stops, building searches, firearms use, cover and concealment tactics. There's a wide range.
Okay. And are you familiar with a tactics that you teach called ambush training?
Yes.
Well, what is that?
Ambush training was a class that was taught in 2012 in service. The concept behind the ambush training is that we were seeing an increase in the number of situations where officers were being ambushed while sitting in their car, and this was in response to that trend. The ambush training focuses on strengths and vulnerabilities of an officer inside a car. It focuses on the ability of being able to, the concept was being able to engage your target, engage that threat from inside that vehicle before exiting the vehicle and trying to find cover.
So what does that entail?
What was instructed was if you were being assaulted, if you were facing deadly force being brought to you from outside the vehicle, it was instructed to draw your weapon. You can engage that person trying to harm you through the windshield. And what we taught in that class is that you can effectively engage a target through a windshield. There's very little deflection. There's very little reduction in the significance of the weapon being used through a windshield. The idea was to turn that mindset of that person assaulting you from being a predator to being prey. In other words, it makes them stop wanting to harm you, and because now you are engaging them, the hope was that their mindset changes as well. Now I'm under attack, I need to move, and that gives you the opportunity to get out of that car, find cover, and you can re-engage that suspect if necessary.
And sir, would you agree with me that that would be kind of like the last measure or that a police officer would be using in that particular situation? They have to draw their gun and shoot from inside the car?
If you're facing a life-threatening assault, then that's the ultimate response, yes.
Would the term desperate measure the last type of thing that a police officer would have to do in that situation?
That's fair, yes.
I mean, at that point in time, the police officer is perceiving that his life is in danger.
Correct.
Inside that car.
Correct.
And there is a term called, have you ever heard the term Cleveland Rush?
Yes.
What is that?
It's a term that I've heard used, and we've talked about it as well. We use it on traffic stops mostly.
But it's not an official type of term, is it?
No, it's something that it's a term that we've used to describe the fact that, rushing up to a car with dangerous suspects in it is something that we've done, but that we desperately want our officers to move away from.
Okay, so I'm
As
confused here.
trainers.
Did you ever train that?
No.
Okay, but how did that term
Not
come to be?
not while I've been in the training section. That's
So
my memory.
how did this term come to be then?
It's because it's for practice in the field. I've seen it practice in the field. I've done it as a patrolman. It's the concept that we try to teach a felony traffic stop. So you want to create distance, you want to control the suspects, you want to pull them out of the car and pull them to you. You don't want to run up to that car and put yourself into danger if you don't.
Sorry, could you slow down just a little?
I'll try, yeah.
You're rushing, if I might say.
Yeah, I feel sorry for my students.
Pardon the dumb joke.
That's okay. So on a felony traffic stop, we want to pull the people from the car and bring them to us, if possible. The Cleveland rush is not doing that, but instead rushing up to that car and engaging the suspects at the car instead of pulling them out and bringing them to you.
So the term Cleveland Rush is not something you teach in the academy.
No.
It's something that has, for lack of a better word, been developed on the street.
It's been done.
Okay. But it's not an official policy.
Oh, no.
Okay. And what is wrong with the Cleveland Rush?
It's dangerous. In a felony situation where you have felony suspects in the car, you're putting yourself right up near them in a position where you can be harmed. Instead of maintaining your distance and controlling the situation, you're losing some of that tactical edge and putting yourself in a position to be possibly harmed.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you teach the officers to be aggressive in their pursuit of felons, so to speak? Do you teach an aggressiveness as far as the police in the academy, as far as apprehending, and we're talking dangerous individuals, okay? Or am I not stating it correctly?
I think I need you to explain what you mean by aggressive.
Okay. Are there any tactics that you teach that you would consider aggressive?
There are tactics that we teach that listen, we have a dangerous job. We are in dangerous positions. We are in dangerous situations. Some of the tactics we use, it's dealing with dangerous situations. There are times when we expect an officer to be in danger. The public expects it. It's part of the job. A good example of that would be an active shooter in a school. We don't have the luxury or time to wait outside of a school and wait for a SWAT team to come and set up barricades and everything else when there's an active shooter inside.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Usually I get in trouble for that. Go ahead.
I'll try to slow down. An active shooter is a good example. So you have an active shooter inside a school. We don't want to wait outside, wait for the SWAT team, wait for everything to be perfect before we go in there and engage and stop that person. We teach for officers in an active shooter situation to go in and engage that active shooter because we want those assaults, that deadly force inside that building to come to an end.
So this term active shooter does have meaning within your training?
Yes.
Okay, define what an why is it different than define what an active shooter is?
An active shooter would be a non-confined person inflicting deadly or serious physical harm to individuals.
And does that term or status of that individual elevate, how should they see your response?
If they're actively harming people, then yes, we need to engage that person and bring that assault to an end.
Okay, and we're talking about tactics, correct? And you said you have a multitude of tactics that you teach. Does crossfire go into that?
Yes.
Explain it. What do you teach about crossfire in your academy?
To avoid it.
Okay.
Simply. It's dangerous. We don't want crossfire. We teach very diligently in our firearms training to avoid, we call it muzzling, allowing your gun to point at somebody else. We're very diligent about making sure that you understand what's behind whatever it is you're trying to shoot. You need to understand what's behind there, and it's dangerous.
Okay. Are there situations where crossfire, I don't want to say for lack of a better word, acceptable tactics, or not tactics, but acceptable result?
There are situations where crossfire would be inevitable, yes.
Okay. Could you think of any of those situations?
I mean, any time where you have somebody attempting to use deadly force, trying to harm somebody, and you need to stop that deadly force, you need to stop what that person is doing. You might be in a situation where there could be people behind where there's heightened risk.
So this crossfire situation is an example of, let's say, not deviating, but having to go outside the standards that you try to teach because of, I'll say, the dynamic nature of situations. Would that be a correct statement?
I mean, we teach to perfect situations a lot of times, or we teach to, we can't, the real world is dynamic, situations are dynamic, and we obviously cannot teach every single possible situation that can happen in the real world. And we can't always control what the backstop is. We can't always control what's behind a target.
Let's talk about position of cover. Do you teach about that particular concept?
Yes, we do.
And tell us some of the criteria regarding that. I mean, what do you teach your cadets in service training with your police officers?
Well, we look at two different things. We look at cover and we look at concealment. Concealment is basically hiding somebody visually, but does not necessarily provide protection from assault by like a firearm. Cover would be more of a hard, it would be not only a visual protection, but it would also be getting behind something that could stop a deadly assault.
Okay. And are there situations where a police officer should stay behind a position of cover and situations where he shouldn't?
Well, it's always preferable to have a position of cover. It's safer. But there are times when you have to leave a position of cover in order to do your job.
Should you, and we're talking about general standards now. We understand that things are fluid and dynamic. Should there ever come a point in time where you leave position of cover and put yourself exposed to gunfire yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll have to leave cover to get a tactical advantage on a situation. You might need to flank a suspect. You may need to engage a suspect because the position of cover is just, you can't get your job done from that position of cover. Sometimes you'll have to put yourself in harm's way in order to get the job done.
Okay, and that is, would you agree with me that's specific to that particular context?
What do you mean?
Meaning whether you leave the position of cover or not. That call is determined by the specific situation. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes.
And again, with that decision-making process, whether you leave cover or not, go back to your use of force and you being a reasonable officer in that situation. Does that come back to that standard?
Your use of force always comes back to that standard. What's objectively reasonable.
So no matter how, at any point in time when you use force, it always has to be objectively reasonable.
Correct.
That's a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. And sir, I want to turn your attention to the State's Exhibit 1185 that I have in front of you, use of force. Okay? And you see the last paragraph of that particular page, first page?
Yes.
And it's in bold letters, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And for the court, could you read that paragraph?
Yes. At the scene of a police incident, many officers of the division may be present, and some officers may not be directly involved in taking police actions. However, this does not relieve any officer present of the obligation to ensure that the requirements of the law and divisional regulations are complied with.
Let me stop you there. What does that mean?
It means that everybody on scene is required to act within law and by policy.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Officers of the Division of Police are required to maintain control if the use of force against a subject clearly becomes excessive.
Okay. So that's in bold letters there, correct?
Correct.
All right. Sir, turning your attention to State's Exhibit, I believe it's 1184. Sure, may I approach that? Sure, could you identify for the record what 1184 is?
This is the vehicle pursuit policy, effective August 5th, 2010. It was effective in 2012.
Okay, and are you familiar with this policy?
I am.
All right, let's generally go over the pursuit policy that was in effect in November 2012. Let's start from the beginning. What are the criteria for police officers to be able to pursue someone?
It has to be, at that time, it had to be an arrestable felony or misdemeanor offense. There's actually a couple different standards, and all of these have to apply. So number one, it has to be an arrestable felony or misdemeanor offense for which a full custody arrest is authorized. The immediate danger of the pursuit is less than the immediate or potential danger to the public if the suspect remains at large and the officer is operating an authorized emergency vehicle.
So if I get pulled over for a traffic ticket and I take off, pursuant to that policy, are you allowed to chase?
You are not.
Okay.
If it's as long as the traffic offense is not authorized, is not a arrest situation.
Okay. Well, what's this? How isn't like 20 miles and over? You can get arrested for speeding, can't you? If you're going like 120 and a 60 mile an hour down the freeway.
Yes.
So there are situations where you can pursue in a misdemeanor situation, correct?
You can. You also have to consider the rest of the order.
Okay. And what is the rest of the order?
The other one being the immediate danger of the pursuit is less than the immediate or potential danger to the public if the suspect remains at large.
So in that situation, if some guy's going 120 down 60 mile an hour freeway, if you start pursuing, then the danger is going to be exasperated. Would you agree with me on that?
Potentially, yes.
So an officer should then back off for that.
According to this policy, yes.
Okay. What's the responsibility of the pursuing officers? What is their responsibility under the policy?
They have numerous responsibilities.
Let's list them.
Okay. Number one is that they need to notify radio that a pursuit is underway. You have to provide the reason for the pursuit, the direction of the travel, description of the vehicle, license plate number of occupants, and the speeds involved. And then you have to get permission from your supervisor to continue.
So you have to get explicit permission from your supervisor.
Correct.
And if you're a patrol officer, correct?
Yes.
Could you tell the court how the command structure is laid out when you're a patrol officer?
When you're a patrol officer, you report directly to a sergeant. And currently, a lieutenant is in charge of a shift. The lieutenant has sergeants underneath them, and then below the sergeants are the patrol officers.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Patrolmen, sergeants, and a lieutenant on the shift.
Okay. Is there a road sergeant going at that point?
There is. There should be a sergeant. Typically, it's a sergeant assigned to each sector in a district.
Okay. Can you put that up there? Give me 1 second, Your Honor. Okay. You familiar with this map?
Yeah.
It shows the districts in the city of Cleveland, does it not?
Yes.
Okay, so when you're in a district, what do you mean by sectors?
A district is typically split into 2 sectors, and each sector is made up of 3 to 4 zones. And the zones are just a geographical area where usually a zone car is assigned.
And is there a supervisor for each sector?
Yes.
So in each district, there's 2 sectors, right?
Yes.
And there's 2 sector supervisors.
Typically, yes.
Are those typically sergeants?
Typically, yes.
And when I say
Lieutenant can fill in if the sergeant's
Right.
not there.
And when I say road sergeants, what does that mean?
A road sergeant is either a sector supervisor, or sometimes will be, if you have 2 sectors, there might be more than 2 sergeants on duty at the time, allowing an extra supervisor to pick up any slack in the district wherever they might be needed.
What I'm getting at is, you're patrolling in a certain sector as a patrol officer. Is there a sergeant that's actually on the road?
Yes.
At the same time you're on?
They're supposed to be, yes.
Okay, they're supposed to be.
Well, hopefully they're there for that day, or they could be at the district working on paperwork, but they are responsible for that sector.
And what is their responsibilities as a sector supervisor?
Generally speaking, they oversee the work of their patrol officers.
Okay. So, if I'm patrolling, for example, and somebody has a turn signal that doesn't go on, for example, you wouldn't anticipate a pursuit because of the turn signal, would you?
No.
Okay. Could you imagine a situation, I should say imagine, have you ever experienced a situation or heard of a situation where a turn signal would turn into a major pursuit?
Yes, that's possible.
Okay. Well, anything's possible, right?
Yes.
But in your training experience, have you ever seen or experienced that?
I've been in numerous pursuits, and I don't recall what led up to all of them. Sometimes it could be a minor traffic violation that, you run the plate and all of a sudden you find out that this car is wanted for something. I mean, it can escalate from a mere traffic violation to something more serious, yes.
But getting back to the use of force policy, isn't it true that you can't use deadly force in the protection of property?
Correct.
So if you have a stolen car that takes off, are you supposed to pursue that?
Yeah, you can pursue a stolen car, yes.
You can.
Yes.
To a point. Which you're
To a point, as long as it falls within the policy.
And the policy says it starts getting dangerous, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Correct.
Would that be agreed?
If the danger to the public outweighs the need to arrest that person, then yes, you're supposed to terminate the
So
pursuit.
going in that hypothetical situation and you run a plate, they have a turn signal, all of a sudden you run the plate and it comes back that's stolen, and the guy starts screaming down a residential neighborhood, what are you going to do then?
It depends on weather, time of day, foot traffic. I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into that.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the pursuit policy. So a sector supervisor has to okay the pursuit policy? The pursuit?
According to the policy in 2012, a supervisor had to okay the pursuit.
But not a sector supervisor?
Not necessarily. Correct.
So going up the chain of command, if we have for example, a road sergeant, he could okay the pursuit, correct?
Sure. Yes.
Even though there's a lieutenant at the station, that sergeant can make that call.
Yes.
Okay. Once a pursuit is started, who then manages it? Who is responsible for that pursuit?
In 2012, it was sector supervisor is what they say. Now, there's a little discrepancy about, in the beginning of the policy, it says that a supervisor has to okay it. It doesn't specify what supervisor, but the rest of the policy refers to a sector supervisor being responsible for the pursuit.
Okay. What if I'm a sector supervisor in District 1 and it goes into 2? Who then is responsible for that?
You are the original sector supervisor who's in charge of that pursuit.
So if a pursuit starts at 1 and goes all the way to 5, that sector supervisor or supervisor for District 1 is responsible all the way through.
Correct.
In 2012.
Correct.
So let's make sure we're all talking about 2012. Okay. What if I'm in District 2 and I want to join in this pursuit that started in 1? Can I do that as a patrol officer?
You could. You'd have to get permission from your sector supervisor to join in that pursuit.
So I got to get my okay from my supervisor first.
Correct.
I don't get the okay from the supervisor in District 1?
It doesn't specifically say that in the policy how that works.
Well, you're a patrol officer, are you not?
Yes.
For how long?
10 years.
And have you ever been in pursuits before?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you get in pursuits? When you were in pursuit, what did you do as a patrol officer?
If I initiate, you talking about if I initiated it or if I'm going to assist?
Either way, and you had experience in both of those?
Yes.
Well, tell us when you initiate.
If I initiate, I broadcast just as the policy dictates what we've initiated the pursuit for, reasoning behind it, everything that we possibly can give to the supervisor.
Okay.
And then we wait for the okay for them to continue.
All right. And what if you want to join in?
If we wanted to join in, according to policy, you're supposed to ask, but a lot of time the radio traffic was heavy and we just jumped right in.
So you violated policy.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Who can call off a pursuit? Who has the authority? Let's say it starts in 1, it's going all the way up to 5. Who has the authority to call off that pursuit?
The sector supervisor who gave initial approval, or anybody above them in the chain of command.
So if I got a lieutenant in District 2 saying, get out, stop the pursuit, he has the authority to do that. Even though it didn't start in his district. I see you kind of shaking your head here. Tell me why.
It's not something that certainly that lieutenant in 2nd District can call off his cars, but calling off the 1st District cars gets a little, I've never seen that done.
Really? So the policy...
And personally.
So is the policy vague in that point? Does it say any supervisor? What does the policy say?
I'd have to look at it again.
Well, you want to take a second and look?
Yes, please. Policy doesn't speak to it that I can find.
Sir, isn't it true that any sergeant can call off a pursuit?
If that sergeant is in control of that pursuit, he can terminate that pursuit.
But how about the sergeants in other districts?
They can call off their cars.
But not the other cars?
Correct.
Is that what you taught in the academy?
I did not teach this policy in the academy. I didn't get to the academy until 2012, and this policy was already in place at that time.
Okay. Well, did you teach it when you got there? I mean, what did you teach in this situation? When you got to the academy in 2012, what did you tell, I should say, oversee the people that teach? What was it?
In 2012, we were not teaching pursuit policy in the academy during in service.
Just in service?
At in service, we did not teach it.
Where did you teach it?
Pursuit policy would have been taught during recruit classes, where we taught not only under the OPATA curriculum for pursuits, for emergency driving, but we'd also teach the policy in the recruit classes.
So what you're telling me right now is pursuit was only taught to the initial academy cadets, correct?
As far as I'm aware of, in the training section, that was when it was taught.
So in 2012, there was never any continuing education on this in-service training regarding pursuits?
In 2012, it was not part of the in-service training, no, not to my memory.
So what you're telling me then is all the officers that are patrolling only had this type of training when they first were in the academy initially?
And with whatever, and by reading the policy and the policy being taught and reinforced by their supervisors.
So what you're telling me then is the only guy that can really call everybody off is the initial supervisor to locate the pursuit.
Or anybody above him in his chain of command.
Yeah, but you're telling me there's separate districts here, so only the district guys can call off their own guys.
Generally, that's what was done.
So in 2012, there was never a situation where one supervisor had control over everything.
Say that again, please.
Meaning, what you're telling the court here is in 2012, there wasn't one supervisor who had control of a multi-district chase.
One supervisor was responsible for the chase. but they don't always have control over the other district cars. So if I'm the District 1 supervisor and there's a chase and it goes to a 2, 3, 4, 5, there could be other cars in that chase that either I'm unaware of or that I don't have control over because I don't know they're there or they're not my people.
Doesn't that appear to be a little bit inadequate?
It's the responsibility of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th district supervisors to control their cars. So if they know their cars are joining that pursuit, it's their job to make sure their cars are acting appropriately.
How do I get into a pursuit if I'm a patrol officer? How do I join a pursuit?
According to policy, you're supposed to request permission to join the pursuit.
But doesn't the policy also say that you have to keep radio traffic clear during a pursuit?
I don't know if the policy at that time said that specifically. I'd have to look at it again.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. You teach all this stuff in the academy, right?
Correct.
The cadets in service. Does that, what you teach in the academy, filter down to the streets, to the patrol officers?
What we teach in the academy, does it filter to the patrol officers?
Yes.
Yes.
Do they, what am I saying is, are there some unofficial, how should I say, procedures that are actually done out on the street that are not really taught in the academy?
Yes.
Or in service training?
Yes.
Does that frustrate you?
It is frustrating.
Well, in your view, why is that?
Why does it happen?
Yes.
Lack of reinforcement.
And who's supposed to reinforce that?
Supervisors.
And so, in your position, is that what you would consider frustration on your part, for lack of a better word?
It is something that we've talked about in depth. That's part of where the terminology Cleveland Rush came from that I spoke about earlier. It's how do we avoid this from happening? How do we avoid the things that we teach in the academy? How do we make that stick in the field? How do we make that have legs? How do we make sure that that's being practiced in the field? As
a patrol officer, did you experience that yourself?
Absolutely.
Did you violate policy in certain situations yourself?
Yes.
And would that consider in the context of pursuits?
Yeah.
And how many pursuits were you in as a patrol officer?
Dozens. I don't have a number.
Okay. And what is the max amount of cars that you were involved in a pursuit?
Maybe 15 to 20.
Okay. All right. So in your experience in 16 years, right?
17.
17. Have you ever heard of a chase or a pursuit before November 12th that had 60 cars in it?
No.
What is the policy regarding the number of cars in a pursuit policy?
Policy says 2 cars.
Can that policy be deviated?
Yes.
All right. And when you're in a pursuit, that deviation, when does that deviation occur? What's the justification for more than 2 getting into a pursuit?
The supervisor would have to okay and permit that the number of cars to rise above 2.
So each supervisor would have to okay each car to get into a pursuit.
The supervisor who gave permission for the pursuit to happen would be the supervisor that would give permission for that number to escalate.
And are there certain restrictions regarding the pursuit pursuant to the policy?
Yes.
And I'll give you an example, parallel. What's parallel?
Paralleling would be to follow the course of the pursuit, but not directly in line. So it could be going down one street, and paralleling would be a street over, 2 street overs.
Are you allowed to do that?
Not without permission.
Why not? What's wrong with paralleling?
Because it's dangerous as well.
Is there any policy within the pursuits that you should be controlling traffic?
I would have to refer to the old pursuit policy again. It's been a while.
Okay.
You want me to take a look?
Yeah, take a look.
You want to know about?
In other words, I'm saying if there's a pursuit, are officers supposed to be down the road, blocking intersections, doing that kind of stuff?
I will say that is what we recommend that to help control traffic, to protect people from entering the avenue of the pursuit. It's something that was practiced when I was in the field. As far as the policy, it specifically would say that. I'll take a look. You want me to look at it?
If you think that would help you answer the question, yes.
Okay.
Before you do that, may I jump in for a
Sure.
second? Let's say there's a pursuit going down Chester eastbound, and someone is near 55th and they decide, I'm going to block off 55th because these cars are about to come zipping through here. First, is that allowed?
Yes.
Second, is that car who's then blocking off 55th considered to be in pursuit or part of the pursuit? In other words, needing permission.
The policy in 2012, I don't believe, spoke to that.
Pardon my interruption, and by all means, you can look through your materials to answer his question.
Prosecutor, can you repeat the question again?
Well, we're talking about whether it explicitly states that you can control traffic during a pursuit. You said it's recommended. You're just looking if it's written down. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
I don't think you're going to find it there, do you?
The only thing I'm seeing in here is one paragraph, page 4, says other available vehicular units may place themselves or be placed by a supervisor in the general area of a pursuit or expected area of pursuit, but they shall not parallel the pursuit without permission from the sector supervisor.
So that kind of implies that you can control the traffic, correct?
I'd say that that's the only thing that touches on that in that policy that I can find.
Well, let me ask you this. Could you think of a situation? Well, let me ask you this. As a matter of course, would you shoot at a car that is pulling away from you on a traffic stop?
Shoot at a car?
Yeah.
No.
In fact, we get back to deadly force. Okay, it should only be utilized when it's a life-threatening situation. Correct?
Correct.
And when you are in a pursuit and there's supposed to be just two cars, when do you deviate from that again?
If circumstances dictate it and it's approved by a supervisor.
In your training and experience, would you agree with me that would have to be an extreme situation?
I don't think it needs to be extreme to go above 2.
Okay.
But, you know, it had to be extreme when the numbers start rising.
Well, you said you're 1 in 10 to 20. Was that an extreme situation?
It was due to the duration of the pursuit and the number of occupants in the car, yes.
Again, these determinations are made out on the street, correct, by the
Correct.
police officer?
Correct.
Would
And
you
the
agree with
supervisor.
me based upon his training and experience?
Yes.
And you probably would agree with me on this, and a certain amount of common sense would come into play too?
Yes.
Okay, and again, when you're using deadly force, is it not true that you don't want to hurt innocent bystanders?
Correct.
Okay. And sir, when you are in the academy as a overall, how should I say, concept that you teach your cadets and maybe in-service training, do you try to teach and create a culture of integrity and honesty?
Absolutely.
And why is that?
Because it's important. It goes to the core values of not only the division, but reflects on the character of the person as well.
And that goes into the fact that your mission is to protect and serve, correct?
Yes.
All right. Can any officer get out of pursuit during the pursuit?
Certainly.
What do they have to do to that?
They can take themselves out of the pursuit and just pull out of the pursuit. You hopefully notify radio, notify your supervisor that you're out of the pursuit, and you can self-terminate.
So what I'm trying to figure out is, I want to make sure that the court understands is, before you join the pursuit, you have to get permission, right?
According to the policy, yes.
You say according to the policy.
Yes.
And in your experience, especially being a patrol officer, did that occur all the time?
No.
Why is it?
Because the radio traffic is heavy. And when the pursuit is on, there's a lot of information that changes. And if you have 10 different people trying to get on the radio at the same time, it clutters the airwaves, and it's difficult to get, for that pursuing car, the initial car in the pursuit, to get information out if they have to combat with 10 other people trying to fill the radio waves.
Well, how does the supervisor know who's in the pursuit, who isn't, then?
It's very difficult.
So things can get out of control.
It can be very difficult to manage.
That's what I'm saying. If you don't know who's in the pursuit, isn't there a point in time where radio traffic is such that you can pop in and say, hey, Sarge, can I get in this?
If there's a lull in the traffic, then yes. But there's not too many lulls, because as soon as there's a lull in the traffic, you have a bunch of people trying to fill that space.
How do you reconcile this?
It's difficult. It's difficult to manage. As a supervisor, if I were in the field, I would coach. You have to start thinking about coaching your people ahead of time. Hey, if this happens, these are the things we want to do. These are the things we're going to need to talk about. You know, you have to talk to your troops. You have to prepare them. You know, you need to be, as a supervisor, I want my supervisors out there talking about these things before they happen, and start coaching before they happen.
So this is what we talked about, some of your frustrations, and it doesn't actually filter down to the daily operation of CPD, correct?
It's frustrating, yes.
Is there any type of policy regarding whether marked cars or unmarked cars are supposed to be in a pursuit?
Yes.
What is that?
An unmarked car should not be in a pursuit unless it's equipped with emergency lights and sirens.
Okay. Well, what does that mean? Because we have cars that have the top lights on there, right?
Yes.
And we have unmarked cars that have the lights in the back or in the front.
Yes.
Does that count?
Yes.
So if we have an unmarked car with lights in the back or the front, that counts?
Yes, that's an unmarked car with lights and tires.
Okay, so how many unmarked cars CPD has out on the field that has no lights or sirens on?
I have no idea.
But there are some of those?
Yes.
And what's the reason why an unmarked car shouldn't be that's the lead car, correct, which we're talking about, or in any pursuit?
Any police in that pursuit.
What I'm saying is this kind of car allowed to be in the lead car in the pursuit?
I believe the policy says, and I double check, but it needs to give way to a marked car.
Why?
Because they're more visible. The light bar on the top is easier to see. The markings on the side, it's easier to see. They're just more visible vehicles.
Well, what should a officer on the street, if he's in a pursuit and all of a sudden he's the lead car, what are you supposed to do? Or she?
If they're in the unmarked car with the lights?
Yes.
If they're the lead in a pursuit and there's a marked car behind them, they should give way to the marked car. Let them become the lead car.
In your training experience, did you see that happen?
Yes.
If the supervisor is in the pursuit itself, he or she is the one that has control of that, correct?
If the initial supervisor that gave approval for that chase is in, yeah, they're still in charge of that chase. But there's possibilities that there's other bosses that are involved in the chase.
But what you've told us is a little confusing, the command structure. Who really is making the calls out there? If it's going through multi-districts. Would that be a fair statement?
It can be difficult to manage, yes.
And so you'd agree with me that high-speed chases are extremely dangerous?
Yes.
You ever hear of a term called the pit maneuver?
Yes.
What is that?
I'm not really I'm not very knowledgeable about that. I am aware of it. It's basically making physical contact with the car in order to disable it.
Well, how does that go? How does pit maneuver?
I'm really not that knowledgeable about it. I've never been trained in it. I've never done any training on it.
Are you supposed to do it?
No, not without permission from a supervisor.
Okay, but do you know what it is?
I'm aware of it, yes.
Could you describe for the court what that is?
And again, I believe it's just making contact, typically with the rear of the car, in order for that car to be spun and for the pursued car and to lose control so you can disable it, take it out of the chase.
And to be clear, unlike the so-called Cleveland Rush, the pit maneuver is a legitimate tactic.
It is a tactic that is taught. We do not teach it, but yes, it is. It's taught elsewhere.
Okay, pardon my language.
Just to demonstrate here, a pit maneuver would be a car hitting the car to try to spin it around and stop it, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. It's a little dangerous, isn't it?
I don't know that much about it. It appears to be very dangerous. Hard to control, I think.
And sir, I want to go back to the joining a chase and the officers that go in and join the chase without really getting permission. Okay? In your experience, was there a culture within the City of Cleveland Police Department, hey, let's get in this chase, let's go, this is exciting, let's jump in? Did you ever experience anything like that?
I don't know if I would describe that as a culture. Certainly there is that feeling has been expressed by people, yes.
That they're kind of excited to be in a chase.
Yes.
And when you were in a chase, tell the court how you felt physiologically, psychologically, when you were in a chase.
They are scary.
Okay.
I learned very quick that if I can avoid a pursuit, I would. I do everything beforehand to keep from getting in a pursuit. Like with a stolen car, I would do everything I can to avoid it because they are scary. There's a lot of adrenaline. You can have tunnel vision. It's very hard to stay calm and cool in a pursuit.
So all of those factors are going in when you're in pursuit. Doesn't that go back to your training then, as to try to calm all those factors that are going on?
Yes, you rely on your training and experience.
And you're in that subjective world that you're in a pursuit, correct? That you just described, right? That's, you're in your car and you're driving down the road and you're experiencing all these things. Is it not the supervisor's job to be outside of that type of context to say whether you should be in a pursuit or not?
Ask that again. The last part of it.
So you're in a pursuit, you're all adrenaline up, tunnel vision, you're excited. Isn't it the job of somebody outside of that to tell you whether, hey, stay in or stay out? Isn't that your supervisor's job?
Yes. They need to, one of the things you learn as a supervisor, you learn as a patrol officer is you can start telling when, you can tell by broadcast, by people's behaviors, whether or not they're getting wound up or you can start sensing when you need to be coaching to the fact that, hey, calm down, let's relax. If somebody's acting, wound up on the radio, it's best to probably move them out of the pursuit and have somebody a little more calm get into the pursuit. I mean, it's just it's managing your people.
Do you find that there was a reluctance to quit the pursuit when officers got in? I mean, you just said, I want to avoid it, yourself. What did you experience when you were out there on the police force?
It depends on the situation. I mean, if it escalates to where this pursuit's not worth it, this person's, this is not a serious offense, he's driving erratically, and it's too dangerous, let's call this thing off.
You would agree with me that a call out that somebody shot at a police officer is probably on one of the highest levels you can imagine, correct?
Yes.
But does that, because it's such a high, say, danger zone, does that entitle the police officers to ignore their training and policies in the Cleveland Police Department?
No.
In fact, shouldn't they be adhering to the training and policies in that particular situation more than anything else because of the dangerousness, how dangerous it is?
We still expect officers to maintain control and to do what they're supposed to do.
Before November 12th, you ever heard of a 60 car chase?
No.
Have you ever trained any type of tactics regarding getting on a hood?
The only time that's taught is for stops and approaches
Explain to the court what you mean.
in the basic academy. So stops and approaches is a course where we teach how to do vehicle stops and how to approach a vehicle and how to interact with an officer or with a person in a car. And one of the lessons in that, it's called, there's a position where you stand in front of the driver, facing the driver. You're looking down at the driver with the driver right here. It's called the post ahead position. If that driver suddenly presents danger to you, if they draw a gun on you or they engage in any kind of a deadly assault, then one of the things that are taught are to lay yourself across the hood. You can pull your weapon and engage the threat from through the windshield.
So you're going across the hood on your stomach or side to right to where the danger is, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is it ever taught that you're supposed to stand on top of a car and shoot into it?
No.
In your experience as a police officer, did you ever, for lack of better words, did you ever see any police officer ever jump on a hood in any situation that you can recall?
I mean, I've seen people jump on cars to elevate themselves to get on top of garages and things like that, but
To shoot?
to shoot, no, I don't think I've ever seen that.
That would be unusual. You agree with me on that one?
It'd be memorable, yes.
Okay. Sir, you talked about in-training service.
Yes.
Do you know the defendant, Michael Brelo? Or know of him?
I do.
Okay. Ever come a point in time where you were aware that he had some in-training service that needed to be done?
Retraining?
Retraining, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Could you explain to the court what happened?
Well, it's tough. It's tough for me to sustain or overrule it, given that I don't exactly know what the answer is. Because perhaps the retraining had something to do with instruction about not to do what was alleged here. So let me at this point
I'll
say
be more
overrule.
specific with my question.
Let's hear what it's about.
Did there come a point in time where Officer Brelo was retrained in the use of force?
Yes.
And regarding in the context of a vehicle stop?
Yes.
Do you know what year that was?
We did the retraining in 2012, July of 2012.
And what happens in retraining? What do you do?
We get an order from the chief saying this officer needs to be retrained, and the chief will give us direction on what the officer needs to be retrained in. We'll look at that order. We'll look at the incident, and we'll come up with a training curriculum and give that officer training based on the orders and what we observe as well.
Do you know the context of that retraining?
What necessitated that retraining,
Yes.
or what was actually done in the retraining?
Both.
The situation was a traffic stop, and Officer Brelo was on the driver's side, his partner was on the passenger side, and I just remember very vaguely, Officer Brelo reached into the car. I don't know what the situation was. He reached into the car pulled away, his partner fired a shot into the car.
So a gun was discharged, correct?
Correct.
But it wasn't Officer Brelo's gun, was it?
No, I don't think so.
It was his partner's gun.
His partner's gun.
Okay. You can agree with me, though, sir, that the longer a chase occurs, the harder it is for police to stay calm.
I actually disagree with that.
Okay. Tell me why.
I think the longer the chase goes, the calmer you are. It's the initial excitement is when the adrenaline dump happens. You're wound up, you're excited. As time goes on, that adrenaline typically, in my experiences, is worn away, and it becomes easier the longer it goes. The adrenaline's not as heavy. You're a little more calm. You're in the middle of it, and I find it to be the longer it goes, the easier it was for me to manage.
Okay. The length in time of chases, when you teach pursuit policy, is there any type of, I would say, training or information given to these police officers as to the length of these chases? Are they usually short, long?
I do not know what is taught with the academy on that. I do not do that. I do not teach that personally, so I can't comment on that.
But you oversee that training, do you?
I oversee it, but I'm not familiar with that lesson plan, and I've never sat in on that class.
Based upon your training and experience, are chases usually short or long? Or you can't answer that?
I would say that typically they're shorter than they are long, I guess. I mean,
Well, what if we ask it this way? Is there a maximum length of a chase where the policy says if you exceed X amount of minutes, you're done?
no.
Pardon my
That's exactly what I was going to ask next. Thank you, Ron. Would you agree with me, sir, the more cars in a chase, the more police cars in a chase, the more dangerous it becomes?
I'm not sure I know the exact reason for your objection. I think it's because it's redundant, and I feel it is redundant. It is sustained for that reason, whether that's your reason or not.
So I'm going to ask you kind of a hypothetical. And again, I understand every context is different, it's dynamic and fluid, and there's certain, how should I say, things that occur. But if you have your suspects, how should I say, trapped or enclosed, okay, when does the use of deadly force then occur, or should it occur?
Well, he can answer the question if he feels he's able to, so overrule.
Ask it again, please.
No. If you have the suspects trapped, and again, I'll just withdraw the question.
Sure. Actually, why don't we go off the record? So just when you're ready, let me know and we'll go back.
Approach, Your Honor.
Well, hold on. Are you ready to?
Yes, I'm sorry.
You okay? We're back on the record, and yes, of course you can.
Sir, I showed.
Haven't heard the question yet, but
Sure, what's it states Exhibit 1188. Have you seen this document before, sir?
Yes, I have.
And could you just tell the court what it is?
well, hold on. Just tell me what it is in very general terms only.
It's a memo concerning the retraining
Of who?
of Officer Brelo and his partner.
Do you have a question?
Where'd that come from?
That came from my sergeant at the range.
But that's in his personnel file?
It's in his training file, yes.
Are you familiar with that document?
Yes, I've seen it before.
And you testified about 10 minutes ago as to exactly what's in that document about Officer Brelo being retrained. Is that correct?
Correct.
And if you could just list down the bullet points real quick of what exactly was done.
Objection.
Sustained. I mean, you're either going to get it into evidence as a business record or not. But the way to get it into evidence is not to have him read it into evidence.
Sir, is that document kept in usual course of business
Yes.
by the police department?
Yes.
And you have routine and daily access to these type of documents?
Yes, I do.
Does that document reflect what orally you told the court regarding the retraining of Officer Brelo?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Your Honor, objection is strike in terms of, I don't want to have a speaking objection, but my objection that goes to the business record method of foundation. I have another basis, but I don't want to be speaking.
Is it, in essence, 404B or
Yes.
something like it?
Something like that, yes, Your Honor.
Right. Well, here's what we'll do. As far as I'm concerned, a sufficient foundation has been laid. It's offered in
Bullet point one, training. What's the date of that memo?
at this point. The contents of this either will or will not get into evidence, but that's going to be decided when you offer it as an exhibit.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Your Honor, let me withdraw my objection because I want to get into this. We have nothing to hide.
Since there is no objection, you may respond to the question, which is basically, what does it say?
The bullet points of what was retrained.
Okay, the retraining was on July 13th of 2012. Bullet points are he was retrained on General Police Order 2.101, use of force, General Police Order 2.103, firearm discharge reporting. It was a review of the dash camera video, review of vehicle stops, vehicle approaches, removing and detaining occupants, weapons handling, weapons nomenclature, on target, on trigger, off target, off trigger training, and live fire drills pertinent to the above topics.
Thank you, Your Honor. No more further questions.
Sir, thank you for your testimony so far, but you remain under oath and obligated to return to the stand after this break at 10:30. You're welcome to step down now.
Thank you.
This is planning going on the record 10:30.